Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We're digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Let us know where we got it right, where we got it completely wrong, and you can do that on Rumble, on unsilentpodcast.com, or various other social media channels. Well, good afternoon, Brian. It's yet another week of fast-moving news cycles and changes to how Earth operates.
That's a good way to say it, yeah.
So what strikes you as being kind of one for the history books that Kenny G needs to get a perspective on?
Well, again, for those listening, Dave and I try to explain to people in future generations what this moment feels like, and we try to cover things that won't be in history books or whatever their version of history books is in 70 years. But I think that the overarching thing I felt since I talked to you last time is it kind of felt to me like we had gone through this period where there was a lot of animosity and deep tribalism, and then after the election it kind of felt like that was kind of going away. But as a result of DOGE and some of the things that are happening there, it's as polar now as I think it was right before the election.
Sure.
Meaning there's a significant part of the population, I don't know, roughly 50%, I would say, who are saying things like, I haven't seen this much winning in who knows how long. I'm not tired of. I'm loving the winning. I'm not getting over the. I'm not tired of winning yet. Like it's winning.
Right.
And the other side, I would say, I don't know, 40% of the population, let's say, is they're tearing the country apart. Nobody elected these people. They're undermining our democracy. We're on our way to dictatorship. This is what fascism looks like. And it feels to me like we kind of took a couple giant steps backwards on the whole unity thing.
Yeah. And probably inevitable, right? I mean, that was probably inevitable. Although I do think that the amount of that and the sort of the concentrated energy of that is less than it used to be. It's less than it was before. I mean, part of that, of course, is because there's a new thing every day. It's like, last week we're going to buy Greenland. Now we're going to take over Gaza. So, it's something new every day. That's like, what? Where did that come from?
I would even go further, Dave. I think there's like 4 somethings new every day.
Yeah, well, it's true. It's true. And it's a lot of it, most of it is in foreign policy, which I find fascinating. But I also think that there's a lot of it that is the people don't know exactly why they're mad. In other words, I know something about USAID because I encountered them in the past in another country and some. So I get a little background on that, but I think most of the people that are protesting the shuttering of USAID and the partially out of their programs to other things or eliminating it altogether probably don't even know what USAID really is, but they're just mad because Trump did something and it sounds like it's going to impact. And so, so in that regard, a lot of, and of course, there's been a lot of that kind of general madness about anything that contradicts the previous system for a long time.
Anything Trump does is immediately looked at through the lens of how would a fascist do this? How would a dictator do this? Right. How would somebody who's undermining our country do this? Like it immediately defaults to that lens.
Yeah, it's an outrage what he did. Now, what did he do? I don't know, but it's an outrage.
So. He said words that we would take over Gaza, and we're going to be outraged about that. Just like the outrage over tariffs on Mexico and Canada, which lasted, I think, around 26 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it does say though, it does show. If people didn't realize it already, if they haven't read his book, The Art of the Deal, it does show, how he operates. He doesn't have any ideological connection to tariffs. He's not like, I love tariffs. He says, I love tariffs because it's his game. It's his ploy. He's going into the
and you have to, if that's going to be your lever, you have to talk as though you're willing to pull that lever. You have to talk about like you're all in on this thing. Like, of course we're going to do tariffs,
right?
Because it would be a pretty meaningless leverage tool or or negotiating tool if people thought you didn't believe it. Like,
Exactly.
this is part of the negotiation process.
Right, 100%. And if anybody doubted it, they shouldn't anymore, because we've had one after another. So we're Tuesday, we're gonna do 25% on Mexico. Well, I had a wonderful, very friendly conversation with Claudia Scheinbaum, and we're gonna delay that for a while. And by the way, she's sending 10,000 troops.
Oh,
You know,
she said 10,000 troops, and she's gonna help us with the cartels and like all
yeah.
this other stuff. And
And then the
yeah,
same thing with Justin Trudeau. It's like, well, they're putting billions into this. They're doing border enforcement. They're putting a fentanyl czar in place. So it kind of baffles me, though, Brian, honestly, that the evidence of this is, it couldn't be more clear. It
yeah,
couldn't be more obvious. I mean, if Trump was standing in your face and saying, "I'm doing this all as a game of chicken, and whoever
right.
gets first
I agree with you
wins,"
100%.
but people don't realize it. I mean, I had a discussion with a relatively conservative guy, a good guy, smart guy, and I said, all of this is just his ploy. And he says, well, yeah, but I got to take him at his word. I said, no, you don't. You take him at what you know he means, not at the sounds that come out of his mouth. I mean, this is
Yeah,
not how you run the world, right? This is not how you do things in the world.
yeah. I think it's fascinating. I agree with you 100%. I think it's fascinating that, and part of it, I think, is just how our society works right now, where again, we talked a few weeks ago about 140 characters, what you have to express
Yeah,
your thought on X, and we're in a like very right now thing. You're in marketing, like people assess whether or not they like a website in less than a second.
yeah,
They we just the speed at which we decide if something is good or bad, and it's very binary like that,
right,
is like lightning speed. So nobody, not I shouldn't say that. Many people are not willing to just take a beat, wait for a couple days, maybe even a couple months in the case of Gaza, and let's see what
sure,
the outcome is and assess how, if it all works based on the outcome,
right,
rather than this knee jerk reaction to he said this thing. I mean, I I don't think. Now, I don't know. Obviously, maybe he does. Maybe he is fully intending on going into Gaza. That seems odd to me. That would be counter to everything he said for 10 years about going into
right,
wars. Um, I do think that if you're trying to get Iran to back down, and North Korea sending missiles to Iran, and the ISIS and all the gnarly things going on in the Middle East for the
yeah,
last however many centuries, um, I do think if you're trying to get those guys to back down, you said, okay, listen, either you can play ball, or we'll just like move into me, your neighbor.
right.
How would you like that? No,
Well,
I,
yeah,
I gotta think that there's probably going to be some people who go, you know what? Let's just play ball instead. It'd be a whole lot easier for us. And so why don't we just wait and see if that's how it works itself out,
right.
rather than this knee jerk reaction? And real quick, specifically for the elected representatives, like the what's his name? Is it Ford, the prime minister of some Canadian province, who said that they canceled a deal with Starlink or something like that, $100 million deal they
Oh,
canceled
yeah,
as soon as the tariffs were announced by
right,
Trump on Friday. They get unannounced on Monday after this great call between Trudeau and Trump.
right,
And this guy has done this thing now where he canceled a $100 million contract. British Columbia said they weren't going to import whiskey from red states anymore, meaning
right,
Tennessee and Kentucky. Like
yeah,
they've done these things now on this knee jerk thing. And I think what's going to be fun to watch is how not just elected representatives, but also the populations are going to be forced to, they're just going to be made fools of by doing these knee jerk reactions and
right.
making permanent decisions based on a knee jerk thing. It's just going to look silly after a while.
Yeah, it will. And I think the the activist class and the far left have painted themselves into a corner, and I think they have, specifically because they've essentially said that the only thing that really matters is identity.
Yeah.
And therefore, so what you said is, why don't we take a beat, wait a couple months and see what happens? What's the outcome? In fact, you even used the word outcome. You merit-based bad man, you.
I know. I know.
So, but
I'm too logical. That's the problem, Dave.
well, no, serious. That's you say that tongue in cheek, but it is. That's exactly right.
Yeah,
Because
for sure.
if your entire worldview is identitarian, if you make your decisions on what somebody says, not based on the merits of what they said, but on who said it, then you have to react the way that they're reacting. Of course, as we've discussed in the past, The problem with reacting that way is it's anti-reality, because
Right.
reality is a merit-based operation. The operating
Yeah.
system of the universe is merit-based.
Right.
There's more merit on staying on the cliff than there is jumping off the cliff. It doesn't matter who's doing it, what their identity is,
Right.
or if they're from a marginally suppressed or marginally oppressed people group or whatever. So,
Yeah.
they have to respond this way. And this is why I think if you look at the sort of the broad scape of, you saw there was new leadership elections at the Democratic Party. Yeah, those are
I was gonna say the video of that, but I know that's gonna make the history book, so I didn't even bother because
yeah.
that was just absolutely like cartoonish.
Well, it was, but it's cartoonish and it's 100% expected, because again, the entire operating system of that thought process is identitarian.
It
So
felt to me like the Daily Wire had drawn up a skit. Like it was like an SNL
well,
skit to
I
me.
mean,
I think it was shocking how cartoonish and buffoonish it looked. I was blown away.
yeah. Oh, I was too. I mean, and it's also fascinating that, what's that old phrase? Oh, how the mighty have fallen. That sort of methodology controlled the world until there was a crack in the ice, and now that entire methodology, that entire ideology has essentially, I mean, it's essentially collapsed, because
Yeah.
if you know, once everybody can admit to themselves that, yeah, this notion of, whenever I'm going to speak in public, I'm first going to do my land acknowledgement, and then I'm going to say that, well, we're forming a committee to do a very important thing, to run a national organization, and we need to have this many of this type and this many of that type and this many of the other type, and if we don't have, and the ratio has to be thus and such, you know anybody with a half a brain is going to look at that and say, what are you even talking about? But you couldn't do that before, because if you did that before, you're this phobe, that phobe. You're.
And again, look at the outcome. The outcome is they elected a straight white guy to run the thing.
I know, yeah, and in fact, two straight white guys, right? I
Yeah.
mean, so you get the chair and
Yeah.
the vice chair. So
Yeah.
it's just
So I'm gonna say this as somebody who I do not want a one party system for any state, any
right. I agree.
county, and especially for the federal government. I
Right.
I think we desperately need two highly functioning parties, or maybe three. I would be all big fan of like that. Whatever.
Sure.
My point is, like, we can't have one party who's like doing well and other parties, all the other parties, however many there are, one or two or seven
Right.
or whatever, not doing well. I think that competing ideas in the parties is a healthy thing for everyone. So, and
100%.
I'm less than 2 decades from being a guy who voted Democrat well over half the time. Not every
Right.
time, but well over half the time. So I'm not coming at this from like a partisan viewpoint. I sincerely thought that after a period of time, like let's say a couple months or whatever, that the Democrats would kind of have an epiphany and be like,
Yeah.
okay, we got a message here. What we're doing isn't working. The gender, the trans stuff,
Yeah.
the biological men and women's sorts, like the polls on that are in the 80 percentile on people not being in favor of that stuff.
Right.
Like it's quite clear,
It
right?
is.
The border stuff. It's like, I don't know, 83% or I don't know. They're not like, it's not a 4% margin.
Right.
It's a substantial margin on these things. Illegal immigrants who are convicted murderers, rapists, again, 80 something percent of people are like, no, get those people out of here.
Right.
I truly thought that after the way the election went and the polling that came out afterwards, that they would kind of have this moment where they go, okay, maybe we should taper down a bit. And so that's when I saw that DNC thing. That's what really floored me, was like, they're not only not tapering it down, they're ratcheting it up.
Right. Well, yeah, and I thought, as you did, it would be sort of like when Bill Clinton in '96 lost the
Yeah.
House. He lost the Senate. The big, or what, '94, the '94 Revolution,
Yeah.
Republican Revolution, and he came out and said the era of big government is over, and so all this, a realization is, he's a smart guy. I thought that, and there's plenty of smart people in the Democratic Party, but maybe not so much, because they just they can't.
I think honestly, Dave, I think it just comes down to courage. I really
Yeah.
do. I don't think at this point it's an intellect thing. I don't think it's an ideological
No,
thing. I truly just believe at this point it's a courage thing. Like
Yeah.
they just have not found anyone who is willing to stand up like Trump has. Again, I'm not saying I'm a Trump lover. I
Right.
like some of the things he's doing. Some of his stuff I wish he wouldn't, but whatever. He was willing to stand up and take the tomatoes,
Yeah.
and he was willing to stand up and say things that everyone knew to be true, but was unpopular, and somebody had to have the balls to say it, and he did.
Yeah.
And they just haven't. They don't have that person right now. They just don't.
Well, and I wonder. I mean, they've had decades of habits of reacting the way that they're reacting, and it's always worked for them. So I think there's part of it. So I agree with you. They don't have a leader. There's no real clear leader that can get past. I mean, you've got the smarmy Gavin Newsom, and then
Yeah,
you've got the bomb throwing Ilhan Omar, activist class folks, but you don't have anybody that's can stand up and say, hey guys, we kind of missed it, and here's where we need to really get. I mean, some people are talking about it, but there's no real leader. And so therefore, in the absence of a leader, they just fall back to their old habits. The problem being that their old habits no longer work. And so I think there's
yeah,
a limited period of time in which they can sort of reform themselves, because I do agree with you. I don't want single party leadership, even if there's people that agree with me. I don't
yeah.
like that,
I
because
That's extremely unhealthy, I think. Yeah.
it is, because you start to believe your own, propaganda,
Well,
and,
you just get lazy. Like
you get
you
lazy.
stop trying to get better, and you stop trying to improve things, and you just get
Exactly.
complacent. Like
Well,
you
and you
see
get
the
entitled, and you get
yeah,
entitled too. I think that's one of the problems. If you're right or if you're left, you're going to get entitled, and you're going to start believing that you really are all that, and
yeah.
then human nature takes over, and you get corrupt. So no, I don't want one party leadership forever either.
Yeah, again, I didn't save the video clip, but there was a section of the DNC thing where it seemed like it was a black woman who was speaking, and she was like the 10th person to speak at the podium or something like that, or 12th person to speak at the podium. She was towards the end. I think she was running for one of the seats or whatever it was they were voting on,
Right?
but I think she was towards the end, and she's at the podium, microphone, shouting to people, "I'm a black woman speaking here. I demand your attention." And I'm paraphrasing there, of
Yeah.
course, but um, and I just remember thinking, like, what instantly hit me was, how is this any different than 1955 Mississippi and a white dude standing there saying, "I'm a white man and you better give me your attention." And
Right.
it had the same icky feeling to me. And this is the part that still just baffles me is how can they not? I think the populace sees it now.
Yeah. Yeah.
In for the most part, there's still like 30% of the population that is in favor of it, probably maybe more. I don't know. Um, but except for those people in the population, I think everyone's kind of like, ick. Like we're like that's gross. It's no less gross a black woman doing it saying that today than it would have been a white man saying it in Mississippi in 1954. It's the same icky thing that we don't like, and it just befuddles me that they can't get out of that. Like it just seems like they had this golden opportunity to be like, okay, we got our butts kicked, we're gonna regroup, and we're gonna come together, and we're gonna do better. They
Yeah.
like do better. Like that's their thing, right?
Oh, they
Like
always say that. Yeah.
we're gonna start listening instead of demanding. And they had this perfect opportunity for that. Like, okay, yeah, your butt kicked. Like we all do it. It happens in life. That's how it works,
Right.
right? And that's where you learn. And I'm like, of course they're gonna do that. They have to, right? But they're just not.
I wonder, they talk about the steps of grieving, right? And you lose
Yeah.
somebody, and there's deny. You start off with denial. No, it can't have, couldn't, that didn't happen. It can't.
That
So
definitely happened the first 2 months after the election, I would say.
yeah, and I think they're probably still there. Now the question will be if how long that cycle takes to play out, because the midterm elections, basically start now, right? The
Yeah.
campaigning for the midterm elections, and if they don't um, really learn the lessons of history, and this is always true. It'll be true in KDG's day as well. It's true now. If you don't learn the lessons of history, you're going to repeat it, and you've got to learn it far enough in advance so that there you can take meaningful action. So they don't have a long period of time to really get their head screwed on straight in order to challenge Trump for power. I mean, they're filing lawsuits, and they're doing this and then they're doing that, and they're screaming they're going to demand. I found it interesting that somebody or other, I don't remember which which politician it was. They were standing outside the USAID headquarters and talking about, we're not going to let them do this. We're going to storm the building. It's like, let's see, January 6th, you really didn't, I'm not sure, the consistency there. But so I don't think there's a lot of time for them to really kind of move through this grieving process before they have to really do a hard reset. And I believe they probably will. I believe that probably before the next elections, they're going to find some new issues, and it won't be, a bad orange man. I mean, there'll be some of that, of course, but they'll have to
Yeah.
find something else to run on because Trump's a lame duck president now.
Well, the path they're on, they'll just say JD Vance is, Trump 2.0, Orange Man 2.0, Hitler 3.0. Like the path they're on, like the
It's not going
scripts
to
kind
work.
of write
It
themselves,
won't
right?
work. It's not going to work.
Well, I agree with you. It's not going to work. But what is interesting to watch and how they speak, though, is they still are saying the same thing that they said after the 2016 election, which is
Right.
we got to get better conveying our message.
Messaging, yeah, it's all
And what they're
messaging.
not understanding is they're conveying it fine.
Yeah,
People don't like it.
because nobody likes it. Yeah, exactly.
Nobody
right.
and they just can't accept the fact that it's not a popular message and that it's just a messaging issue. They just will
Right.
not accept that. So I have I have a couple options of why that would be. One is courage,
Mhm.
that nobody brave enough to say this is a sinking ship, we've got to right it, or we're going to go the way of the Whigs. So
Yeah.
that it could be that, or it could be that they are truly locked into this ideology. And one plausible explanation would be they truly believe this is the right thing,
Sure.
or the other one could be somehow, and we're beginning to see little inklings of this, somehow they're making money on this, right?
Yeah.
So as this, and one of the things I'm sure we'll get into is the USAID coming apart and like the stopping of payments, like all that stuff, like
Yeah.
getting exposed in a way that has not shocked people probably since the printing press was first invented. Of like just learning, like, oh my gosh, you're kidding me! Like this is where money's really going. Like it
Yeah.
just that kind of. And as I was watching, like the list of things we're spending money on, there was a tremendous number of them that were LGBT and trans things in other
Sure.
countries. And so as I watched it, I'm like, wait a second. The saying like follow the money has been around for, I don't know, probably centuries,
Forever.
at least decades.
Yeah.
And it's there for a reason. Like, you just trace it back. Who profits from this?
Yeah. What's the
Right.
incentives?
And so as I'm seeing this list of things that we've been paying for through USAID, a lot of these things are wrapped up in this, the identity stuff, the trans stuff, the whatever. And I'm like, wait a second. So it could be that they truly ideologically believe in this stuff, or it could be they've been funneling money through tax payments to government agencies who then subcontract out to places like USAID, who hire NGOs, who create boards to have meetings and develop plans.
Yeah.
All of those people making six figures plus, $300,000 to $500,000 a piece in some case.
Sure.
Who then give campaign contributions to those people who are running for office in that party.
Yeah.
So it could be, it's just how they make money.
Well, I think honestly, Brian, I think it's all of those. I think there's a group. So, when I think Bernie Sanders is crazy. I mean, he looks crazy, he talks crazy. I should tell you this. I was at his Tacoma Dome 2016 rally when they all came through. So I've seen the man in person, and he's just as crazy in person as he is on TV. Anyway, but the point is that he believes. I believe he is a true believer in what he says, and I believe there's a number of them that fall in that category. Now he's also a rich guy that's railing against rich guys, so there's a bit of hypocrisy, built in there.
Well, but hypocrisy is only bad if you're in a certain class, Dave. You know that.
Yeah, that's right. It's only bad if you get caught too. So I think there's a certain number of people that are true ideologues, and that they're going to fight probably the longest. I believe there's probably a larger class of people that are in it for the money and the power, because Washington D.C. has spent more than any other place in human history in it's basically been a money hose that's been spread all over, spray it at the people you like, and so that's a huge part of it. And so I think there's a lot of that, like the cutting out of USAID, or even the eventual shuttering of the Department of Education. Back when I was working at Apple in the education division, I spent I had to spend a fair amount of time on grant stuff, and so then I had interactions with a lot of folks back in the Department of Education. So there's a gob of money going out from there, and just the homeless industrial complex, all these different things. That makes up a huge percentage of it as well. And then there's another class of people that want to believe that the world is fair and just, and they're just naive. I know a number of people like that who want to believe that the old system that's crumbling around us right now and is being, I mean, Trump's taking a jackhammer to it. They
Yeah.
want to believe that that system was not corrupt because it's personally painful to them to think that it can't be that fair as they see it. So I think there's
Yeah.
each of these categories makes up this coalition, but the problem is one, the money is going away because it's just going away. They're just chopping it left and right. 20,000
Yeah.
federal workers have already taken their 8-month take the money and run check, and
Yep.
there's going to be a bunch more that do that this week, I'm sure. The money's going away from these departments are going to be cut. I mean, that's all happening regardless. And it's a generational shift because once the money goes away from those things and once the permanent infrastructure from those things is cut, then it's going to be hard. You say, well, then the next president will just re-engage it. It'll be hard to do. Even if a Democrat wins, it'll be hard to do because the entire infrastructure has been torn down. The last time he was here, Trump was here, he didn't tear down the infrastructure. He was able to nibble at the edges and get some stuff done.
Yeah.
But this time it's like, no, we're not going to just repaint the walls here. We're just going to take a bulldozer to the
Yep.
house. So
Yeah. And the irony is, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but the irony is, had he won in 2020, he couldn't have done any of this stuff to this degree.
Right, exactly.
It took what it took for it's weird how, again, the everything just lines up where it just takes what it takes, and it's like right on cue and it works out. And so we've talked about like on the progressive side, and then you got the conservative side, I think is no less averse to change. I think their motives are a little different. I believe that there are likely way more than I would care to, I'll be shocked to, I guess I should say, I'll be shocked to probably find out how many of them are on the same financial gravy train as the progressives. And they're all just kind of playing the same game behind the scenes, but they have their talking points to keep things looking, quote unquote, looking right.
Sure.
Right. But then I think for them, it's often just like the plain old just fear of change.
Right.
And the fear of the unknown. Nobody likes to move into uncertainty. I think that they're in that camp, and just like the fear of change, like this is the only structure we know. How would it work any other way? And what's my role in that? And how would I play it? And like, I think they have their own whole other set of drivers of resisting this stuff.
Yep.
But it does feel like a couple things happened this week that I saw this week. The Democrats are not pivoting like I thought they would. I thought they would by now be like coming to grips, like they got to make a change, and they're not. What they're doing is doubling down on, they got to get better on messaging, and they're still talking as if they need to educate us rather than listen to us. And I think until they fix that, they're gonna lose. I just I think until they solve that one problem, that they're done. Right. Then you have all the wheels are coming off of everybody's world in DC because he, like you said, he's just taking a jackhammer to things, and he's doing it at a pace that is just, I've never seen anything like it in my entire life. For sure.
It's never happened. Not like this. I've never seen it.
And the third thing is, we are just getting most likely the very tip of the spear of learning how much our money, tax dollars, have been going to these things.
Yeah.
That is just unbelievable. So, for example, on the 2nd of February, Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, came out and said they've only received $75 billion of the $177 billion we've sent in aid. So he knows $177 billion left the Treasury,
right? And
they received $75 billion of that, around 40%. Somewhere there's $100
billion floating around,
$102 billion. Like, we don't know where that's at. All right, so you got, then you got. I don't know if you saw, this came out today, where USAID has been funding Politico.
No, I didn't.
Politico didn't make payroll today because they ran out of money because the funding from USAID stopped.
Really? Oh my gosh.
Now, this story came out today, so it can change, and there could be nuance and details and things like that. But
I had not heard that.
But Politico has sent an email out to their staff, has been saying, hey, there's some kind of glitch with a bank or whatever. But USAID sent in one case $517,000 to Politico for 37 users. I'm guessing it's some kind of subscription thing, but I don't know, 37 into 517,000.
That's a
That's
serious amount of
pretty
money.
substantial. That's a pretty expensive subscription.
Yeah.
And then another, what is it? $8.2 million to Politico for 237 transactions. So USAID has been, and also came out that they're funding the BBC in England. Like,
I didn't know that either.
The left wing progressive, quote unquote, news organizations
Right.
are getting funded by USAID to, well, I don't know if it's to promote these ideas, but they have been promoting these ideas, the Russia collusion thing, the dossier, like all that stuff,
Right.
the impeachments, like you name what they thrown at Trump.
Right.
Politico has been right in the thick of it, getting funded. So essentially getting funded by our tax dollars to attack a political guy, whether you like him or not.
Right.
That's kind of odd, to say the least.
It's all under the guise of helping poor people in the developing
humanitarian aid.
Humanitarian aid. I mean, I don't think the BBC really qualifies as somebody who needs, some water installed in their village or, malaria vaccinations or something. It's just, that's.
So what I've found fascinating is, of all the things Trump's done so far, including the Gaza thing, including the tariffs, the thing that the progressive elected officials are absolutely losing their minds over is the USAID thing.
Yeah.
And that, I'm a believer that when you hover over the target, when you find the right area, based on the behavior and the outrage and the contempt and the vitriol and the name calling and the hysteria, that those are all human behavior indicators that you're hovering over the target. The guy who gets accused of cheating on his wife, who's been cheating on his wife,
right?
He only gets upset when she accuses him of cheating on him. He doesn't get upset when she bitches that he's late or he lost his job. The thing he would get mad about is, you're cheating on me.
Well, and the amount of money that has gone into USAID is pretty staggering. I've seen some of those figures. So, and I think I think that there's going to be a reformation either of USAID or of some organization that actually does do the good. So they do some good work. There's some things they do that are good, but the amount of billions, tens of billions that are saved will be pretty staggering, especially when we learn, like you say, when we learn all of the things that they've been funding that really have nothing to do with the mission.
Right. And so you hear the likes of AOC and Elizabeth Warren and Bernie and all these folks saying, I don't understand what the fuss is about. It's 0.7% of the total US budget. And those of us who are like seeing all this stuff happening, and I'm a huge fan of this. I could not be more excited. I could not be more excited that they're exposing this stuff. I think it's fantastic.
Yep.
And I'm sure there's people I'm going to lose a lot of respect for because they're caught up in it. And that's a price I'm willing to pay. I think this is fantastic.
Yep.
But they're saying, what's all the fuss? It's 0.7% of our budget. And I'm thinking, this is only 0.7% of our budget. Look what we found so far.
Right.
What do you think we're going to find when we get into Medicaid? What do you think we're going to find when we get into a thing that's 38% of our budget?
Right. Right. Well, and we've got the other international programs. We've got UNRWA. We've got, there's just one thing after another. The fascinating knock-on effect of all this is how much better will our economy be with all these billions and billions of savings from workers that are no longer needed or necessary. Look at Musk when he went into Twitter and laid off 80% of the people and still works just fine.
Yep.
So talk about organizational bloat. The federal government has got more organizational bloat than anything on the planet. So you line up
6% of the federal employees report to work Monday through Friday. That's insane.
Insane. It's insane. I have a feeling, one of the guys that I watch, we talked about this a little bit, is what's going on in Argentina, who Javier Milei, and they actually have really reformed and actually turned their balance sheet around, turned their financial situation around in a country that is, I've been listening to some information about how it used to work, and it's just staggeringly staggeringly corrupt. They didn't have a mortgage system. Oh, just a whole bunch of stuff. But even in that situation, the kinds of things that Trump's is doing with these cuts in Argentina have made it a more financially stable country than it's been in 50 years. So imagine in a place that's not as corrupt as Argentina. I mean, we got our problems, but we didn't have what they had there. How much better our economy could be if when all these things reach their fruition. I suspect it'll be really staggering.
Well, I'm going to mark that you said it. It'll be easy to remember because you said that on 2/5/25 that our fraud is not as bad as Argentina.
Yes,
And a year from now, I'll be curious to see if you still say that.
Oh, well, it will be on a larger scale, shall we say, in terms of numbers. But in terms of, at least
Like
in this country, you
percentages?
can get a mortgage and you don't have to. Well, here's a little tidbit for you. The place that has the most American cash, floating around, other than America, is Argentina.
Okay.
There's 3 times the amount of the bank deposits that in under people's mattresses and in their homes in Argentina than there are in the banks. So, that's why I make that statement.
I got you. Okay. I thought you meant like the percentage of tax money that was going to waste. Okay. Now,
Oh,
now
no,
I'm
no, no.
tracking.
Well, no. I mean, just in terms of the overall system there, it's
Yeah.
insanely corrupt.
Yeah. So mass hysteria this week because of the uncovering of the fraud, abuse, and corruption and waste.
Yep.
Fraud, abuse, and waste, I think, are the 3 terms that Trump's spokeswoman has been
Right.
saying. I think they're just getting started. I think that once they get, some more of these cabinet folks through, whoever those end up being, I think it's going to be jarring to folks. And I wonder if there will ever be a tipping point on the just the sheer volume of waste and corruption and abuse that happens, where even that 30%, like I think I saw a poll the other day that the Democrat Party has a 31% favorability rating right now.
Yeah.
Of that 31%, how many, when they see, let's say, $1 trillion a year being wasted, would go, okay, maybe we should fix this? And how many of that 31% is going to be like, nope, we're sticking to it?
I think there'll be a significant number of people when it's too much for them to deny. I mean, like Trump said, are you going to get tired of winning, right? So, I think when the evidence lines up so much that it's going to be impossible to deny. I mean, as I watch social media, I see a lot of people that would normally be out railing against Trump or just not participating in the conversation at all because there's so much that's happened that is just, it's impossible to deny that it's a good. It's I mean, it's impossible to say that I mean, there's things he does that, like you said, there's things he does that I don't agree with, but there's a ton of stuff that's happened that's just undeniably there's no downside to it. There's just literally no downside.
Yeah.
Taking people that are murderers and rapists and throwing them in Guantanamo Bay, I'm down for that. Why not?
Yeah. If the alternative is they live on the streets in a city with little kids running around, hell yeah.
Exactly. Tren de Aragua, give them a nice Cuban jail. That's fine with me.
Yeah. I think the other thing is going to be interesting if, and again, this Politico and BBC thing just came out today, so there may be retractions and revisions to the story. Who knows? I don't like to talk on here about things that are that soon because oftentimes they change. But let's say, just for the sake of this conversation, that these things are actually true.
Right.
Well, if the rhetoric coming from staunch progressives withers because Politico goes out of business, BBC loses a meaningful part of their funding, and these NGOs and all these folks who are kind of the quote unquote grassroots movement, if the funding for those things stops, well, the percentage of voices is going to shift. Like
that's right.
The percentage of public quote unquote influencer voices will diminish if they are getting their funding from this, and that is their sole means of like paying their mortgage.
Right.
And they have to go get a job, putting tires on a Tesla.
Right.
Those voices will quiet, and there'll be a larger percentage of traditional conservative voices carrying messages.
Yeah, it'll really be a sea change. That was one of the things I was thinking earlier as well. Is it'll really be a sea change because you won't have. I mean, there already is an acceptance of as we said before, it's the revenge of the normies, right? So
Yeah.
normal things will once again appear to be reasonable, and there won't be enough pushback against that. So it really does spiral in that case, doesn't it? Because there's fewer voices to do land acknowledgments, and therefore they fall out of favor. And I mean, that will have political downstream effects. It'll be easier for your average conservative, your average populist to say things and not have 1,000. There'll still be 50 angry voices, but there won't be thousands of voices around every corner yelling at them anymore, which will
Yeah.
then reinforce the normalcy kind of movement that starts, and ultimately makes America more prosperous, ultimately makes us stronger. Which actually, if we have time, I
Yeah,
want to
good.
revisit a theory that I mentioned before here about what's really happening that falls into the fourth turning idea. So what with what Trump is doing, with especially in his sort of foreign adventurism, if you will, or his threats to foreign leaders, all of them, everybody.
Yeah.
What I think we're seeing right now, I thought that it might be before, but I think it's really happening now. I think we're seeing the emergence of an American democratic empire. So, and if you think about empires throughout history, we've already been a hegemony, if you will. Um, but I think what we're seeing right now is the emergence of an empire, not an empire where you've got a Julius Caesar, where Trump's going to be the dictator type empire, but
Yeah.
but a relatively there have been malevolent empires in the past. There have been mostly benevolent empires in the past. The British Empire, of the 1800s, was they were the ones who first eliminated slavery as a part of their empire.
Mhm.
They led us by 65 years in eliminating slavery, while the rest of the world was still practicing it. So they had, there's things that they did in many countries that were generally positive. Now, all those countries, every country wants to be free. So yes, there was rebellion in the, India got free, and Pakistan, all these different places became free. So yay, that's good. But what's happening right now is when Trump said we're going to take over Gaza, it's going to be what is it, Rio on the Med or something like that,
Yeah.
or whichever one it was. It's going to be a
We're gonna have Maragaza.
yeah, yeah, exactly. We could build condos there. It's going to be great. It's the best thing ever. So
It's right on the beach. What's not to like about it?
5 years ago, if an American president or an American politician talked about we're gonna take over Greenland, Panama Canal, that's ours. We want it back. Gaza, we should have a presence there. Maybe we'll build a naval base and a bunch of hotels, and employ everybody there for better jobs than they've ever had before. All of that sets up for whatever this great conflict is that's coming. If we've become in our minds a global, not just hegemony, but a global empire at that point, very similar to the transition in some ways of the Roman Empire in years past, in millennia past, except that without, the Roman Empire was centered on the emperors themselves, and sometimes they had good Marcus Aurelius, sometimes they had bad. I think an American empire I say a democratic empire is what I think is going to emerge, and it's going to be the thing that is tested by probably, and I think this might be the fourth turning event. It's going to be tested by people that don't want to see that level of dominance of America across the world. It takes a Trump to do that. Nobody else
Yeah.
would, anybody would have been laughed and derided out of politics for saying the things he's saying just 3, 4, 5 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
But he's saying it. So I think we're going to see. I think one of the things, I won't be around for Kenny G to tell me whether I was right or wrong, but I wouldn't be surprising to me if Kenny G lives in an American empire.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if it was as simple as just by hemisphere, meaning like all the Western Hemisphere, Canada, all the way
Yeah,
down through South America, being part of that kind of American empire, and
yeah,
including Greenland and things like that. And I honestly, based on how things look today, I would not be surprised to see Europe fall into kind of a going backwards, they're just maybe falling into communism,
Your Asian
or
empire.
the EU becoming the Russia, China, EU kind of
Yeah,
blob, whatever that would look like, and they just have that half the world, and we have our half the world, and like
right.
everything's clean and neat and whatever. I totally could see something like that happening, because you can't have the situation we've had where we're this dominant, quote unquote, dominant sovereign nation who has our fingers and everything. Meanwhile, we can't even control our own borders because
Right.
Mexico's shipping people and drugs and whatever into the country, and like we're just helpless to that. And the cartels aren't a government. They don't care about NATO treaties and the Geneva
Right.
Convention, all that kind of stuff. They have a tremendous amount of influence. The WEFs and WHOs, like there's these big global entities comprised of whomever, I don't even know who it is. They have their fingers in. I totally could see some version of what you're talking about happening.
And I suspect, I was thinking about the Middle East and about my first reaction to Trump saying, we're going to take over Gaza. It's ours now. Was like, what? Are you crazy? That was my first reaction. My second reaction was, huh, I bet the Jordanians, the Egyptians, the Saudis, they might be kind of down for that because it's been the whole Palestinian situation has been for them a unmitigated disaster for 70 years. It's never worked for them. They don't want to take the refugees in. So if you got a big player there that says, hey, we're that's not allowed anymore, and we've got the troops and we've got the stones to do it.
Yeah.
You're over. So I could see an odd alliance there between a lot of these places and us and Israel, the Abraham Accords on steroids, that becomes sort of a part of our annexation of we have territories all throughout the world already. I mean, we've got
Yeah.
territories all throughout the Pacific and in a whole variety of different places. I could see that being the case. I could see that perhaps even some of the European nations would become more dependent on us because of that block of resistance from Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, etc. So
Yeah. Well, it seems to me that in Europe specifically, there's only three options. Either they get more dependent upon us,
right,
they get more dependent on Russia and China,
yep,
or they grow some stones and like
right,
start taking care of themselves.
right.
It seems like it has to be one of those three
It has
things,
to be
right?
one
I
of
mean,
those three. I agree. I agree. And
I
I
mean,
wouldn't be surprised. The Europeans, the old Europeans, are still a proud people. You know,
Mhm.
the if you think in the nationalism that's emerging in Europe, sort of leads me to believe that they will follow a more unified path, that and a Eurocentric path that, and
Yeah.
in some cases, will come into conflict with them, and that's okay. But I
Yeah.
think it will be a world of more. A more imperial world, a more return to the age of empires than any of us anticipated. And I think
Yeah.
the catalyst of that is Trump.
Yeah. Well, I think Trump is a result, not a catalyst more. I think things have
Sure,
gotten
sure.
so bad that he's the
He was inevitable. He was made
he,
inevitable.
yeah,
Didn't
a
cause
Trump
it.
like person was inevitable
Yeah,
because of the path we were going down, for sure.
yeah,
I agree with that
yeah,
100%. And if you look at we talk a lot about the book Fourth Turning, which I think went back like 500 years,
yeah,
but the book Pendulum went back like 2,500 years,
yeah.
way before the US was even a thing, or maybe it was
Right.
only 1,500 years or something. It was many, many centuries though. And so the 80-year cycles it talks about originated in Europe.
Yeah,
It didn't originate in Africa. It didn't originate in Asia. It didn't,
right.
didn't originate in the Americas. It did originate in Europe. So
Yeah,
Europe's been in this cycle longer than we have. And so it seems to me that they're going to have their own version of things getting quote unquote bad enough, like
yeah,
we did. But again, how they'll react, I don't have any way to know that. But they are going to have to make some choices here that they've been reluctant to. And like you said, we're already seeing an upswell of nationalism there, where they're like, hey, maybe we don't need these immigrants here. And again, Trump made all that possible, like the guy
yeah,
or not. Like he was
yeah,
willing to take the tomatoes and withstand the storm. And people are saying like, oh, well, actually that got him elected. Oh, he's actually more popular than he's ever been.
Right.
Oh, people are kind of on board with like common sense stuff. Like,
Right.
you know, again, you and I talked about this a few times now, but I didn't expect him to be the great leader, but it's certainly looking more and more like he's the guy.
It does. It does. And I think the on the counter side of that, I think you've got a couple of very powerful weak countries. You've got China and Russia and Iran, several very powerful but weak countries. So all of them,
North Korea.
China is in a world of hurt economically speaking. So they're tariffing our LNG as an example. Okay, good luck with that. I mean, what are they going to do? Russia, if we're sending oil and LNG and all this energy all over the world, their entire economy is propped up on that. So both all of those things lead to and if you've got a very strong America and a resurgent Europe and a weak Russia and a weak China and a weak Iran and some of those other countries, that sets up a very dangerous situation that likely would lead to war. And but with dying countries on one side and an emerging empire on the other.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Weird stuff.
Well, it's gonna be fascinating to see how it all turns out. I mean that in the most optimistic way I can. Yes. Although I'm still not putting my head in the dirt and pretending like everything's just gonna be sunshine and unicorns from here on. Right. That's for sure. But certainly hoping for the best. And what I can say with certainty is we couldn't continue down the path we were on.
No, it was unsustainable. All of these. Yeah. See, this is the thing about the Middle East. One last thought on that. Everything, you say Trump's done this crazy thing with Gaza, saying these crazy things. Nothing has worked there in 80 years. Nothing. Yeah. So there's really nothing he could say that would be crazier than continuing on the way it's been going.
And that's one of the things that has been truly fascinating to watch. Shocking in some instances, but just kind of fascinating from just like studying human behavior, is these elected representatives who fancy themselves as being our moral superiors and elites who know better and things like that, fighting tooth and nail to keep doing the same thing we've been doing that obviously hasn't worked.
Hasn't worked at all.
It's bizarre. It's great studying human nature. I think we're all wired that way. We all resist change until we absolutely have to do something.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, hey, as Dave mentioned, if you think there's something we got right or wrong, we'd love to hear about it. You can do that by going to unsilentpodcast.com, or Rumble has a great comment section. And until next time, this is Dave and Brian signing off.
See you next week.
Do you want to be Unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.